There is an island sitting above the Arctic Circle, blanketed in ice, almost completely uninhabited, and buried somewhere inside it is one of the most strategically critical military installations on the entire planet. If a missile were ever launched toward North America, the United States would know about it before any other country on Earth, before Europe, before Canada, before its own population had any idea. And the reason for that comes down to this island, Greenland. By the end of this video, you will never look at Greenland the same way again. Most people think of Greenland as a frozen curiosity, that oversized white blob sitting in the upper right corner of the map that looks almost as big as Africa because of how map projections distort the Arctic. It is not even close to that large in reality. But here is the thing. The distortion is not just visual. The way the world has been taught to think about Greenland as remote, irrelevant, a geological footnote, is itself a kind of distortion. Because in the real world, in the rooms where defense decisions are made and where military satellites are plotted, Greenland is not a frozen afterthought. It is the crown jewel of North Atlantic strategy. And in a moment, you will understand exactly why. Let us start with geography, because geography is everything here. If you draw a straight line, the kind a ballistic missile actually travels, arcing over the top of the globe, from Russia toward the eastern United States, that line passes directly over Greenland. This is not a coincidence. It is physics. The shortest path between 2 points on a sphere is called a great circle route, and every great circle route from Eurasia to North America goes through or near the Arctic. Greenland sits at the center of that corridor. That means any intercontinental threat traveling from the east toward America has to pass through Greenland's radar coverage zone first. And that is precisely why, in 1951, the United States signed an agreement with Denmark, the country that controls Greenland, to build what would eventually become one of the most powerful early warning radar systems ever constructed. That base is called Pituffik Space Base, formerly known as Thule Air Base, and what goes on there is the part most people have never heard. Pituffik is not just a radar station. It is the northernmost deep-water port in the world that can support major military operations. It sits at roughly 76 degrees north latitude, which places it deep inside the Arctic Circle, closer to the North Pole than to the southern tip of Greenland. The base hosts a ballistic missile early warning system, a network of massive radar arrays capable of detecting an intercontinental ballistic missile launch within seconds of it leaving the ground on the other side of the planet. The detection window that Pituffik provides to American defense systems is estimated to be several minutes longer than what any other land-based installation could offer, simply because of where Greenland sits on the globe. In a scenario involving nuclear-armed missiles, those extra minutes are not a minor advantage. They are the difference between a response and silence. And in a moment, you will see how close that scenario actually came to happening. At this exact base, in the middle of a frozen Arctic night. If you enjoy these deep dives into maps, hidden geography, and geopolitical history, consider subscribing. There is a lot more of this coming. It was January of 1960. A B-52 bomber carrying 4 nuclear weapons caught fire mid-flight, and the crew was forced to bail out over northern Greenland. The aircraft crashed near Thule. The ice melted. Some of the conventional explosives detonated on impact, and the contamination spread across a significant stretch of frozen terrain. The Danish government, who technically owned the land, was not immediately told the full extent of what had happened. For decades, the official account minimized the severity. It was only through later investigative reporting and declassified documents that a fuller picture emerged, suggesting that cleanup efforts were incomplete and that some material may remain under the ice to this day. This was not an abstract policy failure. This happened on an island whose residents had no say in any of it, in a country that is officially part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but whose people are predominantly indigenous Inuit, and whose history with outside powers is significantly more complicated than any map makes it look. Because here is the part that almost nobody talks about. In 1953, just 2 years after the American base agreement was signed, and Thule expanded dramatically, The Inuit community of Umanak, a village that had existed near that location for generations, was forcibly relocated. Residents reported being given minimal notice, told the move was temporary, and transported to a new location called Kanaak, roughly 150 kilometers further north. They were never allowed to return permanently. Subsequent generations of that community have continued to seek recognition and restitution for what happened. Danish courts have issued various rulings over the decades, and the matter remains legally and morally unresolved. The strategic value of Greenland's geography was purchased, in part, at a human cost that has been largely edited out of the standard geopolitical narrative. That context matters, because right now, in the 21st century, the competition over Greenland has intensified dramatically, and the island's own population finds itself once again at the center of decisions being made by much larger powers. And what comes next in this story gets genuinely strange. In 2019, it was reported that the United States government under President Donald Trump had inquired about the possibility of purchasing Greenland from Denmark. Denmark declined. The story was briefly treated as something between a curiosity and a punchline. But underneath the headline was a strategic logic that defense analysts had been discussing quietly for years. Greenland's location relative to the Arctic is becoming more valuable every single decade, not less. As climate change accelerates the melting of Arctic sea ice, new shipping routes are opening across the top of the world. Routes that dramatically shorten the distance between the Atlantic and the Pacific. The Northwest Passage, once a near-impossible navigation challenge, is increasingly viable for commercial vessels. The Arctic seabed, which runs beneath Greenland's surrounding waters, is believed to contain vast reserves of rare earth minerals, oil, and natural gas. Resources that major powers have already begun quietly maneuvering to control. Whoever holds geographic and military influence over Greenland holds leverage over the entire emerging Arctic economy. Russia has spent the last 15 years dramatically rebuilding its Arctic military presence. New bases, refurbished Soviet-era airstrips, icebreakers, dozens of them, including nuclear-powered variants, far more than any other nation operates. China has invested heavily in research stations and infrastructure across the Arctic, and has formally described itself as a near-Arctic state, a classification that most Arctic nations consider legally meaningless but strategically revealing. The Arctic is becoming contested terrain, and Greenland sits at the center of it like a piece on a chessboard that everyone wants but nobody fully controls. Here is the plot twist, and it is a real one. Greenland has its own parliament. It has had home rule since 1979 and expanded self-governance since 2009. The island is officially moving toward independence from Denmark. Not hypothetically, but as a stated political goal of the Greenlandic government. The population is roughly 57,000 people. The economy is heavily dependent on Danish subsidies, fishing, and a modest tourism sector. Independence would require either developing Greenland's own resource revenue, primarily from mining, or securing alternative external support. Both paths come with profound complications. Mining rare earth elements in a permafrost environment is logistically brutal and environmentally contentious. External investment from powers like China has already drawn Danish and American concern, with specific proposed projects having been blocked or complicated by security objections. Greenland is caught in a geopolitical vice, trying to determine its own future, while every major power on Earth is watching and calculating. The ice sheet itself adds another layer to all of this. Greenland holds roughly 10% of the world's total freshwater in its ice sheet. If that ice sheet were to fully melt, a scenario that climate models consider unlikely within any near-term timeframe, but not impossible over centuries, global sea levels would rise by roughly 7 meters. That number does not require imagination to contextualize. 7 meters of sea level rise eliminates most of the world's major coastal cities. Miami, Amsterdam, Mumbai, Shanghai, New York, all of them would be fundamentally transformed or uninhabitable in their current form. Greenland's ice is not just a geographic feature, It is one of the most consequential physical systems on the planet, and it is changing faster than at any point in recorded history. The melt is accelerating. The fjords are retreating. The permafrost beneath Greenlandic settlements is becoming unstable, and the radar installations buried in the north, built for one kind of threat, are now sitting inside a landscape that is itself becoming a different kind of threat. Here is what makes Greenland genuinely extraordinary when you step back and take the full picture in. This island, this enormous, sparsely populated, often misunderstood stretch of ice and rock, is simultaneously a Cold War relic, an indigenous rights story, an Arctic sovereignty dispute, a climate crisis data point, a rare earth mineral frontier, a shipping route gateway, and a first warning system for potential global conflict. It is all of those things at once. The reason it gets flattened into that oversized white blob on the map is the same reason most people misunderstand it. The standard frame of reference simply does not have room for how much is actually happening there. Think about the radar arrays at Pawtucket for a moment. The ones that would trigger an alert before anyone else on the continent knew what was coming. Those systems are real. They are operational, and they are pointed at the top of the world because that is where the geometry of threat travels. The people who built them understood something that gets lost in flat map thinking. The world is round, the Arctic is central, and Greenland is not on the edge of anything. It is the middle of everything that matters when you zoom out far enough and tilt the globe to where the physics actually point. The next time you see that white shape in the corner of a map, remember that corners are a lie. The Arctic has no corners. It has a center. And Greenland is standing right in it, watching. If this changed how you see Greenland, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into the hidden geography and geopolitical stories that most maps refuse to show you. Drop a comment below with your answer to this question. Do you think Greenland will become fully independent within the next 50 years? There is no wrong answer, and the debate in the comments is always worth reading. Links to further reading are in the description.